Welcome to Moment to Moment. My name is Amy Sass. I'm the Artistic Director of Ragged Wing Ensemble. And thank you so much for joining us. For those who are joining for the first time, Moment to Moment is a live talk series exploring what can be learned, felt, and created during this time of global pandemic. If we stop, slow down, and tune in, what might we hear? So before we begin, I have such a wonderful guest here I can't wait to introduce tonight. Before we begin, I want to introduce our wonderful artists who are supporting us this evening and who will be helping out with this Zoom room. So Joshua and Sango, can you introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Joshua Waterstone. I'm Ensemble Manager of Ragged Wing Ensemble. I'm excited to be here tonight for Moment to Moment. I'll be your technical help while you are on this Zoom call / interactive talk. Just note that you will be muted during this talk until the end when we open up for questions. So if you have a question, feel free to pop it into the Zoom group chat, and we'll be happy to voice it for you or call on you when we open up for questions at the end. And if you have any technical issues, feel free to private message me or message to the group and I'll help you out.
It's Sango.
Hi, I'm Sango Tajima. I'll be moderating the Facebook Live comments. So if you're joining us on Facebook, feel free to type in a comment or a question in the comments, and I'll make sure Amy gets it.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, both of you. So I want to do a sort of settling in. I'm kind of thinking of it as the invocation. I've been doing some acknowledgements on this series to start us, and I have also been kind of leading it like a very, very short kind of grounding meditation. And I decided to rewrite it today and sort of make it kind of fold it together. So as I read these words, I'm going to be lighting a candle to sort of open the space. And I invite you to just settle in and to give yourself some care in whatever way feels good to you. So I'm calling this the arrival. We arrive here, now, in this moment. We arrive with awareness, knowing that we are attending from different physical locations and different time zones. We arrive knowing that no matter where we are, we all sit on Indigenous land. We arrive here, now, in this digital space that some folks have access to and others do not. We arrive with breath, with body, with intention. And at this moment, I'm gonna take this candle, I'm gonna light it. And I'd love for everyone to just take a breath and let it fill your body. And take another one. And part of the reason why I'm doing this is because we tend to use the digital space to speed up, to do a lot of tasks all at the same time, to communicate rapidly. And so it's a bit of an experiment for me about using this kind of digital space to actually slow down. So go ahead and just feel into your spine and notice the surface that's supporting you, that's touching your body right now. And the taste or smell of the air that's coming in through your nose, through your mouth. Maybe the temperature of the air that's touching you. Temperature of the skin. And then also allowing some calm to settle, like inviting calm to live in your cells. just allowing it to settle in. And creating some space, some big space, some vast space inside your belly, your chest, your bones, maybe in the big brain bone up here. So kind of allowing large space to exist within, even as we're looking at our bodies, our faces on this condensed, these little boxes on the screen, tapping into that big space. Great. Thank you all for trying that out with me. I'm going to introduce our guest. I'm so excited. So tonight's topic is called Performing in Viral Times. And our guest tonight is Petra Kuppers, who is a disability culture activist, community performance artist, professor at the University of Michigan, and an advisor for Goddard College's MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts program. Petra leads the Olimpias, an international performance research collective. She is a writer, and her work includes academic books as well as a dark fantasy collection and a new book of performance poetry that just came out that we'll hear about tonight. So Petra, thank you for joining me.
Yay. Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction. This ritual of arrival was wonderful. Thank you. I'm just breathing with you.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, I feel like since I'm so new to Zoom and like internet experiences like this, I feel like that arrival sort of helps me feel a little bit more like we're all in the room together, or at least I can like imagine that. So I would love if you could just give us a little context for your work. I mean, I've read your bio out to our guests tonight, but if you could give us a context for your work as a writer, as a choreographer, as an educator, like what drives it, how did it emerge, your journey?
Yay, thank you. Yeah, so I see myself as first and foremost as a community performance artist. That's my thing, and I'm a disabled woman, so a disability culture artist is very much part of that. When I was a young one, I wanted to go to choreography school in Germany, where I was born, and I was told that you could not get into a choreography school without a doctor's certificate saying that you had at least 4 sound limbs. And no matter which way I counted, I couldn't come to 4, right? So, so no choreography school. So I had to come up with something else. And this coming up with something else has been part of my career ever since. I started the kind of first collective theater company that eventually became the Olimpias. We were a company that worked together for a really long time. We just had so much fun working together through somatic modalities, through embodied modalities. Something similar to what you've just been introducing us to, this way of using our creativity to enter into our bodies and to create from there, to create from these spaces that we have inside ourselves, the vastness of our embodied imagination. And people in that company included people who were unhoused, there included people who were architects, there included people who were students, there were a lot of feminist and queer people, and it was just fabulous. So that was the beginning ground for my work. And from even in that moment, it was so clear that so many of us were excluded from normal theater, right? We couldn't get onto the stage, or we couldn't be at rehearsals regularly because pain or mental health difference didn't allow us to do so. So we always had to come up with other ways of doing it. So that part, coming up with other ways of doing it and having as many people as possible involved in the creative process, that is what is at the heart of my work. Eventually, I moved from Germany to Wales, England, the UK, became part of the disability culture arts movement there. Eventually, I moved to New Zealand and taught dance in the middle of the bush, which was wonderful. I worked in Australia. I worked in lots of different places. I worked in Texas. That was fun too. And then I eventually got this job as a professor. So now I'm a professor, and still see myself dominantly as an artist though. So most of my teaching is about using our senses, using art practice as a way of knowing. That's just a nutshell.
That's in a nutshell, yeah. And one of my, I'm going to throw two things out there. So one is like a little snippet of a quote that that you said in a YouTube thing that I saw today, which was at some point in your career you've been documented saying just about that a lot of your work is about the power of difference and how difference can be enriching.
Yes.
And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about that, and sort of celebrating difference. And then the other piece was this notion of presence, and asking the trainings that you do, having to do with like asking folks to, inviting folks to stop in the flow of everyday movement and step into ourselves. So either of those things, I thought you could respond to that.
Great, I'd be glad to. I start with the first one.
Great.
At the end of that, I will have forgotten the second one and you can ask me again.
Great.
So the power of difference,
Yeah.
I kind of started with that already. Just if you can't do art as everybody else does it, then you just have to invent it. And that's pretty cool, right? So that is like the very first, very straight up way of understanding the power of difference. But there are also, I think, lots of layers to this notion of the power of difference. And one is one that I'm experiencing right now a lot in performing in viral times, engaging in somatic practices in viral times. So I lead a lot of these, as you mentioned, participatory workshops where we are experiencing ourselves in difference. We're experiencing ourselves and our body becomes somewhat strange, alien to ourselves. We're finding these inner universes. You led us into a place like that was comfortable, but it'd probably be quite easy to imagine that you could also feed in instructions that would allow us to understand ourselves as also, for instance, including toxins in our body, you know, the effects of racist histories, whether one comes from a perpetrator nation, like I do from Germany, right, Nazi nation, or whether you're experiencing that poison as something that your ancestors and yourself are experiencing as someone who has to live in a racist society, right? So all of these moments of difference, activating those and making them active for creative practice, I think is such a rich way of working and such a different way from working in processes that try to get to a particular product. I'm very excited in just opening up a process and then having a dialogue with people about how we can both experience this for ourselves and make it resonant for others. And yeah, so those are some of the motors of my work. And so difference as a powerful machine towards production, contact, intimacy, but also discomfort is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sense of discomfort is a really alive space, isn't it? I actually feel like any kind of artistic risk that I take has this level of both intimacy, rawness, and like pain and discomfort. Like it seems to me that, you know, when I experience artistic, when I'm alive as an artist, like those, I have to be ready to like receive that. What am I thinking? I'm thinking of like the things in your body, like capillaries or the senses there, you know, that are very sensitive, very tender. And so the sensation of that and be able to have that sensation be okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Great. What was the last thing that I asked you? So here's the thing. I'm probably going to forget them too.
Right. Come up with some new stuff.
Great. Oh yeah, it was the notion of stopping in the flow of everyday life and stepping into ourselves, which I think, is some of what you've been talking about, and that notion of presence being part of that.
Yeah. So a lot of the actions that I have choreographed or directed or held, will do nicely over the years, outdoors in public spaces. Often, like when I lived in Rhode Island, for instance, we performed in every single public park in Rhode Island, which, given that it was Rhode Island, was possible. I don't think I could do that in Michigan. But so, like, well, us, the Olimpias, this bunch of mainly disabled people, mainly queer people, we, not always, but definitely mainly disabled people, we would come together and we would be in some kind of public space doing our stuff, engaging in beautiful, sensual things that involve us touching a tree and hanging out with it, or engaging with a leaf, or working with wax, like beeswax. I love working with beeswax. So we all would be doing this. It's very obvious from the outside that we are a bunch of disabled people. I use a scooter or wheelchair. Other people have other kinds of markers that show them as different. It might be, people who are shaking, or people who have very different ways of engaging people in eye contact, whatever it happens to be. So it's very obvious that we are that bunch, right? And yet we're doing all these things that are really seductive. And I love the moment when people come up to us and just want to find out what we're doing and whether they can have a little snippet of it, so you just get into these seductive moments where taking a break in the everyday, taking a break even in your walking through the public park, can allow us into a different way of being with one another, can seduce people in. I remember organizing a helping dance outside the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Nigel Charnock, who's a very well-known queer choreographer, had just passed the night before. So the Olimpias, we were assembling on the grass outside the Capitol, and we had this helping dance where everybody would get into the middle and would ask for what they would want. What do you want in order to help you right now? First of all, we start with a thank you. The first round is thanking somebody who had helped us get to that circle on that day. So it's like a gratitude circle. Then someone is in the middle and says what would be helpful for them right now. And it might be that we're all holding them, or that we're just all holding them just energetically, or that we listen to them perform a song, whatever it is that they want. And again, that was one of these super seductive circles where, as you can imagine, that place is used to political performance all the time, right? They see all kinds of people with slogans or marches, but they don't necessarily see a bunch of people looking quite different in a little circle on the grass, being very kind to one another. So that was that was just a lovely little disruption of the way things are usually done, and yet felt like a very strong political gesture as we are holding close our queer ancestors.
I love the notion of a disruption of kindness. I think that's like a kindness activism or whatever. Like, I think that's really beautiful. Gratitude activism, a disruption of kindness. I think that's great. And I think, it may be that you've changed the energy of that space, by that happening there. Now that space has had that as part of its history as well, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And I was wondering, I would love at this moment to kind of move into, so some of the things that you were saying, the thing about sensuality and, attention to the senses and the seductiveness of the experiences that you've cultivated over the years. And I noticed a lot of these things in some of the writing that I was reading as well, in Gut Botany. So Petra's book is called Gut Botany, and I would love to hear more about the phrase Gut Botany and also the book.
I would be delighted to talk about it.
Fabulous.
Amy knows that this book came out on March 3rd, which was the same day that I fell ill with what, at that time there wasn't any testing available, but what I think most of us assumed was probably COVID-19. So every single gig, every single opening event for Gut Botany got canceled. With, me and every other artist out there, me and every person who has performances. So. But that's quite a journey. It's like, whoa, you got to sit with that, right? So you're just trying to launch the baby and it doesn't work. So Gut Botany is a poetry book, but it's also a participatory performance. Here's the book. Very nice book, Gut Botany. And you see this cool fish, everybody?
Yes.
Is that a cool fish or what? So this is a sturgeon. Yeah, just in case you're not quite sure. Sturgeon, international fish. They swim around everywhere at the bottom of lakes and rivers. And this is a book about interspecies relations. It's a book about healing from violence and assault. I got sexually assaulted a few years ago, and this book is the journey of recovery from that in many ways. It's also a book in which I call upon my lineage and my people to help me. So many performance artists from Taylor Mac to Perel, another queer crip artists, they are called upon in here. And and a lot of this work emerges out of performance and also hopefully leads back into performance. And I would love to read you one. So I also, Gut Botany. I'm not going to read the opening poem, which really kind of explains what gut botany means in this context, because it's lots about organs, like Amy, as you, in your opening, you kind of riff on that sense of, I'm asking people to hold their heart, their stomach, and whatever they understand their sexual organs to be. And I asked them to think about what it means in their culture, in their upbringing, to hold those energy centers. But you can find that performance all over the internet, because I've done a few of these Zoomies already, so you can find that. So I thought it'd be more fun to do something different for you. So I'm going to read to you from a piece called Swing in the Convent. This is a piece in which my wife, Stephanie Heit, who is a mental health, someone who lives with mental health difference and someone who's an activist in psychiatry environments, she and I have been engaging with the concept of the asylum. What does an asylum mean? Like a psychiatric asylum, or being granted asylum, or all the various ways in which people understand the word asylum. So for this one, we were invited by a bunch of our colleagues and friends and comrades at Art Prize in Grand Rapids, which is this very interesting, popular cultural art prize. So there were these disability activists who invited us to come out and do a crit of various of the artworks out there. And on that day, Kate Gilmore performed and had a performance up called On Higher Ground. And this performance is in an old convent. So it's like a very, very broken down area of Grand Rapids. And there's an old convent that's no longer inhabited by nuns, but this artist had taken this house and painted the whole house pink from the outside. So that looks pretty good. Pink from the outside, yeah. And red in the inside. And so people, we were invited to come in, and it was actually relatively physically accessible. I could go in there with my little scooter. There was like a little lift, but it was kind of done. They figured it out, how to invite different kinds of people into the space. And you could don this white dress that looked like a nun's dress and some red shoes. And then you could sit on these swings and swing in and out of the windows, which is a super physical activity. If you do that for half an hour, your thighs will know about it. It's like serious exercise. And, the only instruction was you swing and you don't engage with the people outside. So that's all. That was the thing. So I'm going to read that now. And I invite you, I have an instruction for everybody who's listening. Okay, it's poetry, so you're not going to miss anything. It's good. Just let the language wash over yourself. There's no story. There's nothing for you to get. You can just hang out in it. I invite you to get off the sofa or wherever you are and just look around your room, because that's what we did, Stephanie and I, as we're in this installation. We're looking around and we're charting what's going on. So let my words be your guide into charting what's going on for you in your own space. That's to me such an important part of performing in viral times. We're looking into all these people's private spaces, right? We love it, right? Don't you all love it to just be able to go into other people's homes? So go and have a different sense of your own space. Swing in the convent. Lift my small wheelchair over the threshold, you and me. Come home. Abandoned building gutted, paint red, walls empty, stripped, change ourselves. Shapeshift bosoms, tight embrace, cut off tights, scapular habit. Slip into a white dress, a bride for you, hung to the right, no need to look at the extra large labels. Shoe pair too small. We hobble with our toes slightly warped, not far and up in the air. Ground floor, left room. All is painted red. A huge wooden panel marks a door that is no longer there. Parlor, a kneeling stock in the corner, Bible arranged neatly, edges sharply aligned with the grain, and the free wood swings, sturdy black robes looped up into the thick rafters overhead. Surely they have checked for termites. I sit on the swing. Weight lengthens the ropes half an inch to the floor. Wooden board sinks into the sockets of my butt, a familiar rectangle. Thighs squeeze over the red edge. I start up. My feet reach straight out. Gentle arc takes them through, just beyond, the windowsill. I have to be careful. Don't lose a shoe here. I swing. I listen to the sounds from next door. Another bride swings there in the wind. My bride creaks along. I can't hear a thing. Tree rocks forward and back. I can't see the pink outside. My uterus swings in the weeds. I see red. I see white. I see my darling bride. All right. And now everybody come back.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear, actually, if you have, I don't know, should we do that? Should we have a minute? I'd love to hear if people saw something new in their homes as they're
I think
swinging with mums.
Let's open up at this moment for to the full group, and then we can begin to have a full group conversation and sort of riff off of this. So Joshua's going to be unmuting everyone.
Great. Yeah, at this point, everyone can unmute themselves, or you can throw a message in the chat. And we did have from Sango a message before from Keith Davis on Facebook Live. Gut Botany, what a title.
Oh, thank you. I think it's a great title. I love it. It's so good. And such a beautiful book.
Yeah.
I didn't actually show you the insides of the book just before we get to answer Q&A.
Sure.
Look at that, people. Which books these days actually have colored intertitles? So these fabulous designers at Wayne State University Press who published this, they just heard from me. They wanted to know how should they design the book. And I I would love to have intertitles that have the colors of the inside of the body.
Wow.
And you know what they did? They gave it to me. I mean, really, who gets different colored pages throughout the book? I'm just so happy with that. And all in the colors of the body. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Poet Drag Kings. It's the last one. All right. So I'd love to hear what.
Yeah. I can just share a little bit, and then, folks, please jump in. I mean, as I was moving around my room, trying to imagine the red room, the color red started to pop out to me in my own space, right? So, I started to notice where red appeared. I noticed, you also mentioned white. So, the white was standing out as well. You mentioned the swaying, the swinging, the rocking, which I allowed to kind of enter into my body. And then as I was doing that, my eyes sort of alighted on this ring of keys and the way that keys are dangling. And it almost felt like the keys were like a potential performer. The keys were a potential performer. Like if we had kept going, I could have grabbed them, and then that would be part of the rocking, the swaying. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other responses out there?
I have one from Kathy Leonard, who just said, "The colors of the body, I love it."
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Jake, it looked like you unmuted yourself. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Right on, Joshua. Sure, why not? I'll just go ahead and say something. For me, it's noticing all the little imperfections on the ceiling of my house. But also, as to even what Amy said in terms of the colors standing out, there's pictures and they stand out. Just even the black and white of those pictures stands out and then kind of formulates a color from my perception of it. Thank you for providing that space for that, so that way I could kind of notice that about the things in my house.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's lovely. I love that. Yeah, let's experience our own places in alterity, see the ordinary slightly different. Just that seems such a powerful place for performance practice and poetry.
I thought it was great. I could be there at that convent, and the fact that you said it was gutted, which is great. Goes along with what your book, the gut, and the whole idea of the white dresses, the bride dresses here in this convent, and the way you turned a convent into something beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you.
Yeah, going off of that, when you started reading the poem, I immediately pictured like a woman's vagina, which is just like, with the pink outside and like the red inside. So just when you started talking about the white bride dresses, that just made me think of like innocence and purity, and how precious that can be.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to hold that for a moment.
Yeah.
That feeling of innocence.
Precious and lovely and innocent and complete and in itself. I want to hold that too, because of course I already mentioned the assault angle to the book. There are ways in which this becomes a place of rescue, right? So the convent means in multiple ways. The bride means in multiple ways. Yeah. The bodies and our insights mean in multiple ways. Thank you for hearing that.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, there's another chat. Joshua, can you read that out?
Sure. From Rachel Brown, Petra, what has been your healing journey from sexual assault?
Yeah, many different kinds of healing journeys. I mean, it's an ongoing journey, right? It's still very real. beginning to perform from Gut Botany has been its own healing journey and stressful journey as well. I mean, every time, like, you know, things come up, we're holding things in our bodies, we're holding them together. For me, finding communication and finding that strength on the groundedness in multiple sites has been very important. So throughout the book and also throughout my wider practice, there's an ecosomatic approach, you know, a way in which I am encountering otherness, both in, you know, in other species, in the non-human world, but also in which I encounter ecosomatics in other humans. You know, so much of healing from assault is about being okay with other humans again. And this is something we're all going to face, you know, when this pandemic gets to a place where we can be released from sheltering in place, which I imagine many of us are doing, I'm doing right now. We will have to find ways of healing ourselves from being afraid of the other person, and yet also being aware of what it means to be someone living in the 21st century, someone who lives in a world that has viral loads, toxic loads, you know, all the kinds of things that some of us have been able to ignore for long periods of time, but many others have not, you know, so we hopefully will all emerge as more aware. And so a lot of my healing journey is about being aware of what it means to reach out towards the other, whether it is human, non-human, plant, or in the case of the book, fish and insects. There's lots of fish and insects in there. And there's many other ways in which I could answer that question, but those are some that can lead us on right now. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I'm thinking about just the notion of gut and gutted, and, you know, just reading a little bit of some of the other poems and the fish that are moving through the body in the first poem, which Petra didn't read, but you can find online. And the sense of, like, you know, when we say gutted, we mean emptied, right? We mean everything has been pulled out. Yeah. And there's a hollowness, or at least there could be a hollowness in that gutted space. But then also this sense of the gut itself and how it does empty, right? And it's like, it's about cleaning out those toxins. So, you know, I was thinking, Petra, about what you were saying about, you know, the book that you're holding, and that book, and you open it up and you see the colors of the inside of the body, and you read through these poems, and these poems about healing, you know, and healing from assault, and coming back to a place where you can approach another person. Yeah. And just thinking about how that narrative, or that experience is, like, the story of that is, like, within us. Like, if we took our bodies and we turned them inside out, right, we'd, like, be able to see narrative and that story.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so a lot of my performances over the years have been about finding ground and finding that weight and the spaciousness inside ourselves to allow others to enter, to allow imagination to enter, to allow being penetrable to the fish, being penetrable to whatever forces are around us. So, and I talked earlier about the earlier moments in my career. One of my defining moments probably was, I was working in Wales. I was working in a mental health self-help center. So everybody there had significant experiences of mental health difference. Many people in our group had both institutionalized experiences, but also imprisonment, homelessness, all kinds of stuff like that. And I was doing I was coming in there as a theater artist with Boal under one arm and Brecht under the other arm, you know, like, yay, ready to go, let's do this stuff. and I was doing this thing where, and I encourage, again, let's all get up so that we can also feel our body. So if everybody could just get up for me right now, if you want to, if you're interested in that. I invite you to get up and just get on your feet, if that is available to you. It's not always available to me, but I can do it on my sits bones. And just, you know, the very basic theater exercise of just shifting forward and back, side to side, you know, finding your center. Super basic exercise. Forward and back on your feet. It's exploring that range of motion, side to side, until you find yourself resting sort of in the middle point of all that. Okay. Now I can't see you, right? I can't see all of you. I can quickly look, but you know, the camera goes heaven knows where, so it doesn't really matter. So most of you were probably able to do that. Now, when I did this, and you can now leave that, you can sit down again, or you can just stay in that groundedness. When I did this with people in these environments, many of them fell over. I mean, they were just, do that yourself right now. If you're still standing, take a step forward and just, or kind of move forward move forward in such a way that you have to step. Yeah, thanks. Amy just did it. That's right. So you just do this, and then whoops, you have to use your feet in order to capture yourself. We can do that. We can capture ourselves. You know, we are super able to do that. Most people can you know, have enough sense of balance to do that. So thank you. But I was really interested in why that would be that so many people just couldn't find their center. And very quickly over the years that I worked with my comrades, we figured out that it was because so many of us had our bodies invaded. You know, so many of us had lived through depot medication, where you're being injected with something against your will and it leaches into your system. Many of us had meds that give us, you know, like that impact the control that we have of our own body. Many of us had been, as I said, institutionalized or imprisoned, or just experienced ourselves as having multiple operations, or dealing with a lot of pain, a lot of meds, and the kind of altering bodyscape that comes with medication. So those were the givens to so many of us. So we found artwork, like many of the poems that I'm shared in Gut Botany, that allowed us to go on imaginative journeys and encounter each other from a place of ground. But we always, the first thing we had to learn together is to get to a place of groundedness and imagination, without going into full out, now we got to stand up and we've got to think about our lines and we have to think about choreography and, you know, all those kinds of things. We just like left that. So much of Olimpias practice is about the basics of being with ourselves, our breath, our gut, and then inviting influences in just within the compass of what is possible for us within that lack of balance, coming back to balance. You know, that step away, step back in. That's the part that I find the juiciest part for artwork with other people who have been under assault in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that's really powerful work. I was as you were talking about this, I was thinking about the word environment.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, because I was researching the word ecosomatic earlier, as I was telling you. Like somatic, I believe, is like, what was that?
Exactly. What could that be?
Oh yeah. So somatic is sort of, it's like mind, body,
Mm-hmm.
right? Connection. Yeah. And it, you know, that word comes up in a lot of body work practices, but we also use it in arts practices. And then I was like, all right, so what is ecosomatic? And I looked it up and I saw a lot of different, you know, riffs on the idea. But the one that I the one that came up initially on the urban what is it, the Urban Dictionary?
Oh, the Urban Dictionary has
Yes,
one. Oh,
the
okay.
Urban Dictionary. I was like, what's that? And what they were saying was physical symptoms or illness caused by psychological impact of environment.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, what do you think about that?
That sounds more like, yeah, that sounds like psychosomatic, ecosomatic. It's a different, I mean, that is a sort of diagnostic label. That's not quite what I understand it to be, but you know,
yeah,
interesting. I mean, it at least acknowledges that our environments can be a place of toxicity for so many of us.
right.
But there are so many other ways of seeing it. And how about if I answer you with a poem? How does that sound?
Please.
Let's do that. So I'm reading you different ones. It's from a section called Craniosacral Rhythms, because that is sort of a section in which I'm most specifically addressing the various kinds of body-mind, embodiment, healing modalities. It's called Hot Springs, which is what I love. Hot springs. I am just a total sucker for hot springs. I live in a very painful body, so if I can get into hot water, I'm good. Hot springs. Crystals invade my bones, my joints, calm heat pressures raw nerves, red wounded sites, air chemicals repair tissue right now. Feet dangle in the waters, sip thick green. The lining of my mouth, sharps from deep beneath the lake, salt-filtered excretion of a bony land. A homeopathy for my chasm joints. Rocky cliffs, no purchase for soil, accumulate the blow, the wind. Trees bend. Do not try to stand up straight. Indigenous zones. Rock trail after the erratic journey. Silica water rushes pearl kernels onto the land, onto my skin, slips through a hair follicle, bonds with tired calcium. Frangible and dry, nestles in a splintery embrace. Make yourself this place. Bones open into embrace, my face outward into the wind's curvature. There you go. That's one definition of ecosomatic. Yay. We live interpenetrated, we live with one another.
Yeah.
And that was my little dog barking in the middle of that. So. Hi, Trudy.
Yeah. Thoughts from folks, comments, reflections, riffs?
That was absolutely beautiful, Petra. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you
And
so
you know
much.
what? We are all one, actually. We are. And you're beautiful, by the way, too.
Thank you. Thanks, Deborah.
I think I'm ready for a soak, Petra.
I know, right? Yeah. I'm very aware that my hot water pool is closed, of course. Very sad. Yes. It's one of the many things that I'm missing in isolation.
Yeah.
So many of our support system, both humans and non-humans, are closed off to us right now.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm wondering, so, you know, that environment, being able to float in that environment, that saline environment, and how—
My swimming pool.
Yes, and how much like that is what we're doing in utero, you know, when we are in our innocent state. And you know, that cushion of safety, you know, that feels like, you know, yeah, I mean, I think about the environment right now, you know, just like the energetic environment is really what I'm talking about, and the sort of, you know, temperature of anxiety or fear, uncertainty or disruption that's happening in our global culture right now. And I'm curious, you know, performing in viral times. I mean, here we are, we're performing in viral times, giving us these beautiful bits from your book. As an instructor, you know, leading artists you process right now in the way that you do? What are you finding is occurring?
Yeah, what I find is occurring is what has always occurred, that artists find really good ways forward, right? I find two things. So I'm teaching right now a group study called Performing in Viral Times. And in there, various graduate students present what they're doing right now. And we discuss their projects. We all research what is going on out there in the world of online performances, online somatics that help us, like the technique training. One of us, for instance, is a voice and movement teacher. What approaches are people using? So that's kind of the background to this particular class. And so people are doing two things. They are really embracing the different kinds of media that are out there and that specifically speak to their students. So I have seen so many TikTok performances. It's been like, whoa, cool, And before we got on, Joshua and I were talking about sonnets, Shakespearean sonnets, and Patrick Stewart doing all these sonnet things right now, and it's Shotgun Theater. So many different companies are taking on this one sonnet a day thing, and so many artists that I know are doing that because it's so grounded and bounded, right? You learn a sonnet in the morning, and then you perform it in the afternoon to the camera, and then you exchange it with other people. And hey presto, international performance community, at least for those of us who like Shakespeare, international maybe, but sort of international. So there's a lot of these really exciting experiments going on, and artists always find a way. But the other thing that I'm probably at least as interested in is withheldness and a pausing, not a passivity, but a receptivity, where people just try to think about, well, what does this moment, apart from the online media and mediation, what does this moment mean right now? How are we reinventing lives right now? So I am very excited to see also different experiences right now, experiments of creating alternative community forums, artists stepping up to help one another, those of us with institutional backgrounds, channeling our, any research money that might be left into artist salaries or honoraria for body workers or whatever, like paying for Zoom meetings. So many of the somatic Zoom things are for free right now. But what does it mean if we were to try to think about spending at least as much money as we used to spend on that kind of stuff now by paying the people who lead the sessions online? So there's just a lot of that kind of imagination going on. Yeah, and I find both of those approaches really fascinating. How we both take a step back and think about the capitalistic, production-driven environment that we're in, and also the sheer joy and overflow of just making it work, right? I mean, some of you, I don't know that anybody here on this Zoom was a participant in the Full Pink Moon performance.
Yeah, please tell us about that. Please tell us about that.
Were you part of it?
I was not, but you and I spoke about it briefly, and it sounded amazing. So I'd love.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
It was so fun. So, and of course, I didn't now remember that I was going to talk about that. So, I can't look up right now. Oh yeah, I remember now. Chicago-based company Opera Poveta. They put it on together with, I think, Cal Arts was also involved, and they used a score by Pauline Oliveros, who's this amazing lesbian ancestor, performance artist, musician, sound artist. So they put on an opera by her called Full Pink Moon, a lunar opera. And in the middle of the night for like 6 hours, like 200 artists, performance artists from around the world, we met together, all dressed up. I had beautiful makeup on. I was going as Dr. Totentanz, Dr. Dance of Death, so I had like skeletal makeup. And my wife had a tutu around her head and was like the pink moon, basically. And so it was just fun. And she played a giant gong, and I played a little steel tongue drum, and we were also droning, sounding. So the score was to just listen to one another and then respond to one another. So it's a very small score, but it created this meditative cycle for 6 hours. with people looking fabulous, and people did amazing things with the spaces they were in. Like we used disco lights. We have Turtle Disco here, which is our somatic writing studio. And so we have some really cool lights. So we just made the whole thing into this pink cave, just bouncing off the walls. You know, we can do all kinds of things with lighting with theater people. So lots of people did amazing stuff like that, like gorgeous space outfits, or created fabulous backgrounds for themselves and then dressed up. And there we were just a few weeks into this huge international pandemic, and we were all making sounds together with a minimal score and really just being in each other's presence. It was fabulous. I loved it so much. It's probably going to be one of my favorite moments of performance in viral times.
How many people do you feel like was in that process, would you imagine?
Well, I think we were about 200 people who were performing, and we were at points, we were like, I think I saw like 300-400 people being audience. You know, it's like, and it's the middle of the night, right? We're talking like, for East Coast people, middle of the night. West Coast people, it was like 6 o'clock in the evening until midnight. European people, whatever, you know, like it was, like, I think most of us had a night experience because it was a moon experience. But of course, if you were in, say, in Australia or New Zealand, you might have had a day experience.
Petra, Jessica Martin put into the chat, do you have to be part of a university to be part of your class? And also, where can we find more online classes about somatics?
Excellent. Thank you for that question. No, I mean, at this point, I do a lot of these gut botany performances. So I have visited with a lot of classrooms and community groups. I've been offering like little free tasters of it to many classrooms for people who don't have money to bring in people. I think if people have money to bring in people, they should pay artists who do not have institutional backing. I have institutional backing. And I'm trying not to take gigs away from artists who need those gigs right now, but I'm happy to come and visit classrooms that don't have cash available. So lots of like smaller colleges, community colleges, that kind of thing. I don't run a regular series myself right now. I participate in Zoom classes, and some really good places to look for really cool somatic classes right now that I participate in every week is, for instance, movement research in New York City. If you Google movement research, they have a bunch of really cool online classes. I participate in a wonderful body-mind centering class by Olive Bieringa, who lives in Oslo. She's a New Zealander, I believe, and I've known her for many, many years over in the circuit, you know, the wider circuit of people who do somatic performance work. And I'm now able to participate in her body-mind centering class. So you can Google her. Her company is called Body Cartography. Body Cartography. So body-mind centering, body cartography, movement research. There are other, you know, like if you look up your local people who used to do classes in the real world and see if they're offering Zoom classes right now, because that's the best way to ensure that your local people get money, because they need money right now. Otherwise, they might not be around once this pandemic is over. So here in my area, I would point you to Stephanie Cohen, Stephanie with an F, Cohen, C-O-H-E-N. She runs online classes in authentic movement right now. But just look in your local area. There are also a bunch of websites that collate some of these classes. Powerful movement research. I just want to make sure I give you a lot of those because I really want to drive traffic there, but I also really want people to pay their people. So let's see, where is it? I just opened up my computer. What is, oh yeah, dancingalonetogether.org. Dancingalonetogether.org is a really good website that brings together a lot of dance classes and some somatic classes. Yeah. Okay, Joshua, did you capture some of those things that I said, and maybe you can put them in the chat for me? That would be really great.
I did, yes.
Thank you.
And maybe if they link to your blog space, would there also be a list?
I don't have a blog space, but I am If they can go to my website.
Your website.
And yeah, go to the website. Yeah, you'll find quite a few links there. But if we've written down movement research, that's a really good place to get going with.
Great.
Sure. Stephanie Kirk, thank you. Great. That's Monica. You wrote that down. Thank you.
Okay, good. I want to leave this last few minutes open for any other comments or questions from our attendees. Jump in. Okay. And we're going to start wrapping up, but before I wrap up, just a last little, I guess it's a question or just a little prompt for Petra, which is the notion of, you know, you've mentioned the sort of explosion of online classes, you know, the sort of notion, I love this notion of dancing alone together. So interesting. I'm curious about what you're finding in terms of the emerging screen culture, like physically, with you in your classes, with you with your students. You know, we talked a tiny bit on Tuesday about how we don't have to look at the screen the whole time. You know, like there's something about, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think it's so important. We all have to learn, right? We're learning right now what the limits of this medium are. I mean, obviously you're interviewing me right now, so I'm going to stare at the screen and be incredibly present, right? But if I were just, you know, like part of it, I think it's so important and so fun to see more of our world, of where we actually are, to appreciate the home spaces, as big or as small as they are. And I know that Monica is on this call with us. She's one, like me, she's a participant in a somatic experiencing class that Daniel Davis out of Northampton is leading. And he does work with us that's called orienting. So where you deal with, you know, like the harshness of the world right now. Thank you, Joshua, you're writing it down. He deals with it by getting us to think about the outside and the inside, to give us more options so that we can look around ourselves in order to not get stuck in what we're feeling inside, whether that be loneliness, pain, upset, you know, all these things that can make us really focused in our side and we're so in ourselves. So he just earlier this afternoon led us into just looking around our environment and looking at the book that's lying on my coffee table here, or looking at my iPhone, looking at a cushion and taking in the shape, and then using my movement to echo that shape, you know, to just get into this very gentle movement, not like full-on dancey movement, but just a little bit of gentle movement to allow me some space between my own experiences inside and the objects or creatures that surround us outside. So yeah, Monica is writing some stuff about Daniel down there, which is lovely. So I find that kind of approach really useful in thinking about performing and just being in viral times. We don't all have to stare at the screen the whole time. This is so exhausting. It's so exhausting trying to read everything that we normally read in public space, to read it on this tiny screen, like your body language. You know, trying to read all the, you know, you're giving me these beautiful cues right now. You're nodding at me. I'm getting a very strong sense that it's good. You're following me. You know, we have all these ways in which we're communicating, even when we're not speaking. And I'm trying to tap into that and to be with you. But we can be with each other energetically as well. I don't actually have to look at you all the time. I could look away. I could use my senses to tap into you, maybe, and get a sense of whether we're together or not. And, you know, there's so many ways in which we can be with one another. Disability culture has taught me a lot about that, because particularly neurodiverse communities have shown us many, many different ways in which we can be with one another without eye contact, without this constant feedback loop. You know, there are other ways in which we can be attentive with one another, which might include me sitting here and just scribbling in my journal, just like writing in my journal the whole time, doesn't mean that I'm not with you. And maybe the screen time adventure can allow us to reinvent some of the public cultures that we have, to think more capaciously about what it might mean to be together and alone, to be in community, and to be all isolated in our little living rooms. So, there's so many, those kinds of things I just find really interesting to think about right now. And I haven't really quite got a handle yet on what I'm going to say about that when this is all over. But I think as a performance maker, I am just fascinated and soaking in how this culture is developing.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm noticing, I'm like, practice looking away from Petra right now. How does that feel? And when I did that for a little bit while you were speaking, what I noticed is I started breathing, and that the sort of, you were talking about, I can be with you without having to like send facial cues to you, right? So I was like, okay, if you release that desire or that responsibility for a moment, what then kind of rises up, and I'm noticing, like my sense of smell, the sense of air, that like my belly can like talk to Petra or something like somehow the relationship went down as opposed to being stuck here.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Yeah. I think that's what we did with the poetry reading at the beginning, right? I feel like so many of the responses that I got was people getting into their own experience and their own spaces just by being released from this thing, right? So, yeah. So artful ways of being with one another is such a helpful way to allow us to think that things could be otherwise.
Thank you. Thank you for that permission. It's just nice to like give each other permission to like release responsibility, look elsewhere, like allow our gaze to maybe come out of our ear or something like that. Yeah, I think Rachel just sent a little chat. Do you want to read that? And then I'm going to wrap up, Joshua.
Oh, she was just saying, thank you so much, Petra. What a gift it's been to meet you. We've had a couple people, Yangsu also had to exit and said that it was a gift to meet you as well.
Great, lovely. Thank you, everybody. It's lovely. And I know Amy has a wonderful closing exercise for us, which I'm very excited about.
Great. So at the end of these sessions, for those who are just joining for the first time, I like to give a little creative invitation for those who feel like doing it. And then you're welcome to do it however you like in your life. And then if you also are inspired to send us any documentation of it, we post it, we include it in kind of like an ongoing dialogue that sort of carries this type of program forward further. The document, sending it to us, there'll be information on the chat and on the Facebook Live about how to do that. So the creative prompt is, I'm calling it The Organs Speak. And I originally thought of it as a writing prompt, but I imagine that the word writing can be interpreted however you like. You may want to write with your body, with sculptural elements, with natural elements, nature, with food, with sound, with whatever it is that you feel is your place to create a story, narrative, explore. Imagine the perspective of one or more of your organs, your heart, your stomach, your liver, your tongue, your sexual organs, your skin, etc. What is the voice of this organ? What does it need to say? What truth is revealed? What does it want or need? And what wisdom does it hold? So that's the creative prompt. I believe we're putting that in the chat where you can find all that information. Petra, I want to thank you so much for coming tonight and and sharing this time for me and your generosity of time to be on this program and your stories.
Yeah, this is amazing. Thank you that's just a lovely evening conversation. It was just lovely. I'm so glad that we got to do this. And thank you also to Joshua and everybody else who made this possible. I'm so glad that we had this time together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Amy, I loved your question. I love the intimacy. It was great.
Thank you.
We have, so we have a link that folks can follow to receive a bunch of information to kind of connect with the guest speaker, with the creative assignment, and also just with Ragged Wing Ensemble. And it's one link to rule them all is what we're calling it. And we are putting the link into the chat, into the Facebook Live. You will be able to follow Petra's work. There's several, there's a website, there's a hashtag, and there is another website for the writing and the book that you can follow. And then also I want to acknowledge a partnership with Theater Bay Area right now. So Theater Bay Area is hosting a series of webinars called The Changing Face of Theater, Creating During COVID. Which is aimed at helping theater makers stay active during this period of isolation. And the webinars are free with registration, and we are going to be putting that information out there as well. And another plug for the Performing Arts Worker Relief Fund, which you can also find on the TBA website. Super important for our many, many performing artists who have had their gigs and their income sort of canceled because of this time that we're in. So, you know, if you feel that you would like to access that for yourself, or if you feel like you would like to donate to it, it's a great place to look. And I would also love to ask you to consider a donation to Ragged Wing Ensemble. We are in a really interesting transitional time in our 16-year history. We're about to end one kind of chapter and begin a new chapter that we're hoping will be really building a sustainable foundation for artists to create work, creating, you know, it's not exactly starting over because there's been so much history, but in some ways it is like, all right, now that we actually learned all that stuff from 16 years, how can we begin again with much more intention? So that's where we are right now, and we'd love the support to keep this program alive. Yes, and also, so next week, next Thursday, 5 o'clock Pacific time, we have another topic called We Create Our Experience. And the guest speaker will be life coach, keynote speaker, and creative powerhouse, Imari Anderson. We will be discussing rewiring the mind, shifting perspectives, and transformation from the inside out, which will be a great kind of, you know, riff off of this conversation with Petra. So thank you again to Petra, and I want to thank Joshua and Sango for your work tonight, keeping this all going smoothly. And may each of you be well and healthy. And I hope to see you next week on Moment to Moment. Thanks. Thanks, Petra.
Thank you.
Thanks all.